The City of Campbell River Council Debate number 2. I'm Mary Ruth Snyder. I'm the Executive Director for the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce. We are co-hosting this event and all of the other debates, along with the Tidemark Theatre and the Campbell River Mere. We would like to acknowledge that we are on Lakota territory, the Weewakam and Weewakai, and all other Métis that reside in this area and territory. The debate will start shortly. Good evening, candidates. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for having the courage to let your names stand and participate in such a very personal way in our democracy. We will begin tonight with opening introductions, but first I must say that we were expecting candidate Claire Mogliv, but Claire is home ill with COVID, so she is going to try to join us on Wednesday via Zoom. And tonight we also have Sandra Milligan joining us through Zoom because she is also battling COVID currently. So we are going to begin with candidate Chapman on the far left, candidate Donaldson in the middle, candidate Milligan on the screen via Zoom, and candidate Sterling to my far right. Opening statements, candidate Chapman, you can begin.
Good evening, my name's Doug Chapman, and yes, I know I'm boring. I've worked in local government, finance and administration for 37 years as a chief finance officer and a chief administrative officer or city manager, and worked for 9 different communities over the years, which included 7 municipalities and 2 regional districts. After retiring in 2019, I started consulting to local governments in administration and financial issues. I have a diploma in local government administration and finance from Vancouver Island University. I hold a CPA and CGA designation and a professional certificate in asset management planning. I've seen these challenging times before, and I believe I have a specialized skill set to help guide the organization through the difficult times that are coming our way. In my opinion, Canada and the world are on the verge of an economic recession. We all need to get real about our lists of needs and wants. Fill the needs first, then the wants. We need to recession-proof our city budget so we don't lose what we have built over the years, especially staff. Downtown security is a must and needs to be dealt with. This is a complex problem that will require complex thinking and problem solving. We'll need to involve many different agencies and governments to work on this issue. It's crucial to have affordable housing and accessible housing. The city needs to free up land for development by dealing with the backlog of developments, applications, subdivisions for approval.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson.
Hi, I'm Gwen Donaldson. I'm running for Campbell River City Council because we need to add new ideas to our community leadership. We need to promote modern solutions, and we need more collaboration and cooperation at the council level so that we can build a community that works better for all of us. I moved to Campbell River about 8 years ago with my husband, Paul Dowler, because he was born and raised here. I grew up in a commercial fishing family in Ucluelet, so Vancouver Island is home for me. And currently I live in Willow Point with Paul and our elementary age kids, and there's nowhere I would rather call home and raise my kids than Campbell River. I have over a decade of experience in the tourism industry, and I've worked extensively in the sport and commercial fishing industries. When my kids were toddlers, I completed a master's degree in public administration, and today I own Jellyfish Consulting, where I work to coordinate community-based projects and provide research, reporting, and communications services. Here, I worked on a number of local projects ranging from the Community Action Team, which works on the drug poisoning crisis, to food security and many community events, like Live Streets and Go By Bike Week. I volunteer with Special Olympics, and I've been involved in many of Campbell River's early childhood programs over the years. My focus for council is to see us move into the future by using sound policy development and management practices and make sure we focus on actually getting things done so we can get our plans off of the shelf and into reality. I want to bring a new, optimistic, and collaborative voice to our city's leadership. I'm grateful to be here tonight on the territory of the Likwata people, and I'm really looking forward to sharing my vision for Campbell River with you all this evening. And I hope you consider voting for me on October 5th, 12th, or 15th. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Milligan.
Thank you. Bonsoir. Thank you so much for investing your time to get to know the candidates for City Council. Your work to make informed choices at the polls will ensure that the changes you see in Campbell River in the next few years are the ones that make you happy. I've lived in Campbell River for 2 decades. I raised my 3 children here. I feel very fortunate to have been part of the communities in schools, in sports, and the arts that support and connect our families. I teach university biology full-time at North Island College. It's so rewarding to inspire and mentor students as they develop their own career paths and then become citizens who contribute to our community. Alongside family and work, I've developed a deep portfolio of volunteer achievements. I was president of Greenways Land Trust for many years. I worked with great teams to build the aquarium, a community garden, and most recently a nonprofit society for Beaver Lodge. I'm very appreciative of the many nonprofits and volunteers who make Campbell River a wonderful place to be. In the last few years, though, I realized that the changes I want to see in our community now require me to be on City Council. In my vision of Campbell River, which I know many of you share, everyone is housed. Affordable housing is available, so our businesses and hospital have staff. The economy is diverse and innovative, particularly with respect to changing our processes so we have less impact on the environment. And in my Campbell River, we collectively celebrate and nurture our people and the natural beauty of our city.
Thank you. Candidate Sterling.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody that has attended here and those are streaming in. My name is Ferris Sterling, and I am a lifelong born and raised Campbell Riverite. I've been fortunate enough to grow up here and spend my entire life here without having to move for work or for school. My parents are here, and my children are here. All my friends and my teammates are also here. I've never left Campbell River, and I never plan to. I've volunteered for many things, such as coaching youth or adult sports with baseball, soccer, even dodgeball. And I've helped out with many community projects, such as the Campbell River and Cumberland Art Battle, as well as the cleaning up and helping with the chainsaw carvings down in Willow Point. Between my last job and my current job, I have spent about 8 weeks volunteering at the Campbell River Habitat for Humanity Restore. But going forward, Campbell River needs a strong voice and leadership, somebody that has been in your shoes. My current job, I work for a federal government nonprofit organization that helps small businesses. I've worked with you, and I know firsthand how hard things have been with theft, vandalism, intimidation of yourself, and assault of employees. I want you to know that I have heard you, and I will fight for you. I'm also a renter in town. I understand that at this point, I will probably never own a home in Campbell River. My current place that I'm about to move into has been 4 months late. It's half the size of my previous place, and it costs almost twice as much. All my renters and friends in that same position, I've heard you, and I will fight for you as well. My parents and friends and all the pensioners in town who I've met through banking, I understand how hard it is on fixed income with the inflation that we're facing today, and how much every dollar counts, and how much we all hate to see wastes of money. I've worked with many of you, I've seen and heard you, and I will fight for you as well. And last but not least, to give a voice to our healthcare workers, I just want you to know that I will be a voice for you, and I've seen what you've gone through. I thank you, and I understand you, and I will fight for you. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to tonight.
Thank you. And now, with the first question, we move over to candidate Donaldson. What are your top 3 priorities, and which one would you start with if elected?
Hi. So my top 3 priorities are a pyramid of concerns. So one leads to the other. The first major challenge facing us is housing, infrastructure, and asset management. Without an appropriate asset management plan, we can't responsibly build in our community. We really need to make sure that our infrastructure is monitored, intact, and accounted for so that we can have the appropriate water and sewage resources in our community when we do build. We need to diversify our housing stock and look at how we can responsibly build our community in a way that suits current and future generations. Building on top of that, we have an HR crisis in our community. This extends into RCMP, municipal government healthcare. This is also attached to housing. Many people cannot afford to live here, so we don't have the employees that we need. We also need to look at company culture and making sure that we have the human resources working well in the city of Campbell River. And then on top of that is downtown safety. So we need a well-informed long-term plan and some easy wins. I think that there are a lot of easy wins that haven't been fully investigated in our community. Secondary suites was an easy housing win. We should have implemented that. 70% of the community did want to see broad secondary suite bylaws. In terms of downtown activation, public art, business incentives, permissive tax bylaws, sidewalk patios, food trucks, those are all easy wins to activate our downtown core. So I see it as a pyramid. Everything is kind of built on housing infrastructure. Then we have a human resource crisis, and we have our downtown safety and activation. Those are my top 3 priorities.
And which one would you start with?
Easy wins. But that is actually first thing I would start with, secondary suites. The work is done, the bylaw is there, it just needs to be implemented.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Milligan, what are your top 3 priorities and which one would you start with?
My first priority is to set up the team dynamic. We're going to have 7 voices, and we're not going to get anywhere if everybody has their top 3 and all wants to get their top 3 done. So the most important thing is to sit down together collectively, not in January, but in October, at the end of October, early November, and do strategic planning where we get on board right away, all 7, for our collective top 3 priorities. Now, of the top priorities that we've heard lots of people talk about already in our other 2 days of debates, I think we have a common vision that no one wants anyone living unhoused downtown. So I think that will be a pretty easy one to get all 7 voices together and agree that that's a common vision and a top priority. To get action towards that vision, a top priority would be to build temporary shelter, similar to what's been done in Duncan very recently, in Victoria, and now Port Alberni is on board. And those projects have been in place for a few months now. We can learn from them. We need to get people housed right away. The third priority would be to implement a secondary suite bylaw. This is the tool that's used by most municipalities to provide affordable housing, and it's the best way to increase property taxes and deal with the affordable housing issue.
Thank you. And candidate Sterling, top 3 priorities, and which one would you start with?
My top 3 priorities here in town would definitely be housing, dealing with the homelessness situation downtown, as well as a lot of the issues that we've heard about at City Hall. For the housing policy, I think that we need to understand that a lot of what we're seeing today run by BC Housing and Island Health has already been tried in many areas around the world, and I've looked at these specifically in Chicago, Hawaii, and Dallas. These programs that they're trying to do today have been failing since the 70s and early 80s. I think that we need to look at something a lot different. And we also need to look at utilizing our companies more that build a lot of the housing and programs such as those run through the Habitat for Humanity here in town. Those are fantastic programs, and I can't say enough about the help that Habitat for Humanity has given to a lot of low-income people here in town. The homeless situation downtown, it's pretty rough, and the business owners down there are going to need a lot of our support, especially when they're going to have to start to repay the CERB loans. The amount of money that they're going to have to put towards that is going to be roughly the equivalent of laying off 1 part-time employee for every single business that's taken out one of those loans. And so we have to start to create some capacity with our services here in town for potentially what could be coming. The third thing would be a lot of the issues with management at City Hall. We've heard from the other debates there about what's been going on, the turnover issues, a lot of the empty positions that they currently have there, and there's just not a whole lot of trust with those that are running there. So I would like to implement something along those lines where we talk about the people who have left our town and figure out why they're leaving Campbell River first before we make a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Chapman.
Thank you. Well, as mentioned before, we're going to be thrown right into the budget system. We need a budget for the beginning of the year. The first priority is to make sure our financial planning is sustainable. And when I say sustainable, can you continue doing this year after year after year after year? You can't take money out of surplus each year and fund taxes. It's not going to last long. To that end, I'll make sure I'll do my best at least, to make sure there's no large tax increases. People don't understand in the financial plan now there's approximately almost a 6% increase scheduled for 2020. And when you look at the reality of everything, I think we're looking more at close to 10 to 12%. And we need to look at the budget carefully, and I think the new council will have some very difficult decisions on what programs and which ones should be shifted out to, and which people are going to work on new projects. I don't anticipate people being laid off, but I think the priorities are going to change and people will be working on different projects. Number two is the land development. We need more housing. Currently, the city has over 700 development permits outstanding. Some of them date back to 2017. The last item is downtown safety. It's a complex issue, and it's going to require a lot of study.
Thank you. All right, Candidate Milligan, knowing the priorities that you've just mentioned, if you could provide us a brief overview of your professional and personal life and what would inform your tackling of the priorities based on your own life experience.
Thank you. Well, in my life experience, I've been involved in, sorry, I'm getting feedback that makes it really hard to talk. Is there a mic that can be turned off there? Sorry, I couldn't actually hear myself. Are we good again? Okay, sorry, much better. If you don't mind starting the clock again for me. Thank you, Mary Ruth. So in my experience, I've been involved as a president of Greenways Land Trust for many years. In that time, our budget tripled, and we needed to be proactive to ensure that this huge influx of money was going to be managed effectively. And so I do what I always do, evidence-based. I look to excellent resources to find out, what does a board need to do to have effective governance? With that background, we implemented a number of new projects, one important one being a decision-making policy. So the community is always coming to us with great ideas, and we just can't say yes to everything because our staff wasn't funded to do those particular jobs. So we would work through the decision-making policy to ask us, number one, does it fit our mission? Which is why it's so important for council to get together, united on a strategic plan. And then to ask, is there the staff capacity to carry out this project? And that's a really important one too. I often see, city council send something to staff like, oh, here's a great idea, staff, come back with a report. But it seems as though council isn't looking at the fact that city staff already have their work plan made, and that to throw an extra thing randomly on top of that is ineffective use of your staff's time. So it's really important to have a clear strategic plan, to have a really good idea of what your staff's capacity is to get the job done.
Thank you. Thank you, Candidate Milligan. Candidate Sterling.
Thanks. The project that I would really want to tackle most would definitely be the housing here in town, especially like Mr. Chapman had said there, with the complete backlog back to 2017 with a lot of these permits. It's just not acceptable. One of the things that I would probably look at doing is with the assistant general manager who has just recently left, I would probably look at not fulfilling that role and instead using that money to hire on more people to process permits or do bylaw enforcement. That way that we could also bring in extra money from those there. So I understand that with our rental economy being so tight, every single person is competing for that one space. And I really found that when I was looking at the existing place that I'm about to move into. So I think we really have to look at expanding that kind of building here in town. And I think we also have to come up with some policies about who we want to attract and help in town. And one of the things that I would look at doing to help fulfill a lot of the gaps that we have here in Campbell River is perhaps not just a low income housing, but a low earned income housing, which would also include pensioners, because we all are fighting for that one remaining spot. And we have to decide what kind of fabric we want Campbell River to have going forward for all the help that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Chapman.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes. So if you could provide a very brief overview of your personal and professional life and how you think it will inform how you work towards the priorities you've identified.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I worked 37 years in local government administration and finance, and I agree that there's capacity issues, and I think those can be overcome. The first, whenever any council gets elected, you have a strategic priority setting session, and it has to be realistic, and I've done those for years. And I think we need to be very seriously, I use my skills and what I've done in the past 37 years in local government, and hopefully I'll develop integrated, some of them vertically integrated ideas so that we can achieve a lot of the goals that council sets. Council in the end is going to be setting these goals. That's where 7 people need to come together, talk as one, and set the priorities for the community. Not for 1 year, but for 4 years. It's got to be long term. And also it should, if it could, go out further to 10 years so that we start building capacity in year 2 and 3 if we know we need that capacity in year 8. It has to be longer term thinking. Politicians get elected and they have a 4-year window, and a year after then it's just a 3-year window. We need politicians with a vision. We need politicians who can look into the future and determine what's going to be best with consultation with our electorate as to what's best for our community.
Thank you. And candidate Donaldson.
So yeah, my background, structurally, Master's in Public Administration. So I think the goal here is really understanding the role of the municipal government, the elected officials, and their role in general strategic oversight for the city. So when we look at how we develop our policies, what we should do is do the appropriate research, consult our stakeholders, consult our professionals, listen to our staff, and then work together with our other elected officials to make the best decision for all of us based on the information that we have, provided by our appropriate processes. At that point, then we have to adequately resource those solutions. We have to develop a monitoring and implementation plan. And that's really how we need to get through this. It's not about knowing everything about every little piece of this. It's about knowing that you have a good staff of about 100 and 250 people who do work for the city, and how to empower them to do their best work. These are a group of highly qualified professionals. We have advisory groups. We have a highly educated public in our community. We need to use the resources that we have effectively to make the best decisions for all of us. So it's not about how I'm going to do this thing. It's about how I'm going to work together with the community and everybody else at the council table to make these things happen and to ensure they do happen. And a number of the challenges, personally, I do work in the downtown. I have a lot of projects down there, so I do understand the social context of what happens. But it's about following a process.
Thank you. On to the next question. Candidate Sterling, you're up first. A number of citizens without a family doctor is growing exponentially, not just through the province, but here in Campbell River. What would you propose for recruitment and retention of new physicians and their families to come and live in Campbell River?
Well, I think it's going to come back to the housing issue and the lack of supply. I know many professionals who refuse to actually move to Campbell River because it is unaffordable or there aren't places for them to live, such as accountants who are working remotely in places like Kamloops and Calgary for local employers here. So we really have to address that housing issue first to get them to town. I think things along the lines of them setting up their clinics, that we would probably use products, such as property tax deferments to attract them to the area, as well as get some specific housing for a lot of the support staff that they're going to need. So I think that's definitely one of the big issues here as well too, is that the service level employee housing is just non-existent here in town. And everywhere we go where we see these lineups, or it's taking us months to get in to see somebody, that's the effect that this is going to have on us. And with how expensive things are, I've personally witnessed a lot of my friends who maybe have been in relationships and split up, both people have to move to Alberta because they can no longer afford to live in Campbell River. So we keep losing a lot of really good people because of the high cost of housing here. So I think that's one thing that really has to be addressed. So I'm very fortunate. I do have a fantastic doctor. Yeah, and we need a lot of health professionals here, doctors, nurses, RCAs, et cetera. So yeah, I'm in support of housing and housing policies directed at people in that field, specifically with my low earned income housing approach initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson, or sorry, Chapman.
Me?
Yes, you.
I'm going to ask you to could you repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. There are a number of citizens without a family doctor, and that list is growing exponentially. A lot of doctors are leaving the province for whatever reason, and Campbell River is no exception. So what would you propose as recruitment and retention of new physicians and their families to come and live in Campbell River?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to say it's a provincial jurisdictional issue and that's up to the province to solve, because it's all of our problems to solve, not just the province, it's ours as well. And I agree that there's a lack of housing. I talked to a doctor who is leaving. She was a pediatrician and couldn't get adequate housing. So it is true. We need to develop our housing stock so people have a decent place to live for everyone. And the property tax incentive, there are opportunities in the community charter for the city to partner and to help create facilities. Many communities have built clinics and the doctors just simply move in, furnish them, and staff them. The province should be doing that, and I'd be lobbying the province to step up and create facilities so that all the communities in the province are treated equally, and not just some communities get built facilities because they want the doctors there. Doctors, okay, the last point is there's a lack of recreation, I think, in my opinion, and we could do with some more recreation facilities.
Okay, thank you. And candidate Donaldson.
Yeah, so I would agree. Obviously, housing is a concern. So I think we need to diversify our housing stock. We also need to probably invest in mixed-use commercial residential to create the suitable office spaces for doctors as well. Big one would be working with the Division of Family Practice, whose role is actually to kind of recruit and retain doctors in our community, and figuring out how we can empower them to bring more doctors into our community, what's appealing to doctors and physicians, and how we can motivate them to stay. Further, we could advocate to different levels of government to ensure we're building the health systems that meet the needs of our community. There are some structural concerns with how doctors are compensated around the fee-for-service model. So again, working with the relevant physicians in our community to make sure that we're advocating to maintain the services that they want. So yeah, I would say the big one, though, is the Division of Family Practice. They're an incredible resource for bringing doctors and physicians into our community. So we need to work with the people who do know what they need. And outside of that, housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Milligan, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. So first off, one good news piece of item. I worked hard over many years to keep on the table at North Island College, opening a rural pre-health program. And my colleague has since taken over pushing that through, and we're looking at starting that in September. So the idea is we would have 16 people from the local area, trained in the local area, who then would be staying in the local area to provide healthcare. Second, again, it's a housing issue. I think that the answer to almost every single question is the lack of affordable housing. Health clinics have huge overhead. It's very expensive to provide good sterile technique, good healthcare. And a big part of that overhead is staffing. And now the need to pay staff more to be able to recruit and retain. Our Economic Development Office did their strategic plan last year, innovative by nature, and they had 4 workshops with businesses, and business owners say the same thing. Their number one need is retaining and recruiting staff, and that main concern is affordable housing. And finally, whenever the opportunity arises, I'd be advocating to put something in place such that when we pay for people's education to become doctors, they're required to stay in Canada and be doctors for a period of time after their graduation.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move to candidate Chapman. What role should council play in protecting and restoring Campbell River hospital services, such as restoring the lab to full local capabilities?
I think council is in a key position to lobby the provincial government and VHA to bring those services back. I have advised councils in the past that if you want something to happen, you have to go down to Victoria, you have to talk to the minister and thump on the desk and make your case. You're not going to do it by going to UBCM and having a 15-minute meeting with the Minister of Health. That's not going to do it. The first thing is to talk to VHA and get them to understand the urgency and that we are not going to tolerate them taking the services out of here, especially when critical care is needed. We don't have time to send samples down to either Nanaimo or Victoria for testing. So it's council needs to lobby VHA, Vancouver Island Health Authority, and the province to make sure this gets rectified. It's not acceptable to have a hospital of this size that services the North Island and then not have lack of services. That's not equitable service for the citizens of Campbell River and North Vancouver Island compared to what other communities have.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson.
Yeah, I would agree with Doug. We obviously need to work to keep the services that we have here. We do have a number of very involved advocacy groups, I think the Citizens for Quality Healthcare. So working with them to help move those advocacy issues along. I would also probably recommend reaching out to partners in Courtenay, Comox, and the North Island to see if we can kind of create a hub model. We may be stronger together if we advocate together to keep services on the North Island. Just make a stronger case for why we need to have a hub model for healthcare up here. That can be difficult given the regional district lines and the municipality lines on the North Island, but I think if we kind of cooperate as a North Island health service delivery area, we will have better success with advocacy in VHA. I know that's what I've found. So, thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Milligan?
Thank you. Yes, I agree with candidate Chapman and Donaldson. The Citizens for Quality Healthcare have been doing a great job compiling all the changes that have happened over the last many years. And it really does appear that there's a bit of a conflict of interest that's happened where, you know, a group of pathologists in Victoria make a recommendation to Island Health to provide a service that is removed from our local hospital. So you have a group of doctors who financially benefit from a recommendation are allowed to make the recommendation. Seems a bit odd. And so I think it's almost at the point in the process, it certainly needs to go to Patient Care Quality Office. And, you know, their website says pretty clearly, if you're not satisfied with the resolution you see received from Patient Care Quality Office, then you go to the next step, to the review board. I think we need to be looking at how pathology is dealt with outside of Island Health, because it really seems that Island Health has not been particularly amenable to the requests that have been given. And we also need a regional hospital board to be fighting for this. It seems as though the Citizens for Quality Healthcare have made many passionate pleas to that board, and they have all stopped at the chair of that board and not gone beyond, so that the regional hospital board has not been advocating to retain our pathology, which is essential.
Candidate Sterling.
Thank you. I'm probably going to be the most critical of the BC healthcare system and the way that it operates here in Campbell River. So before we had the COVID pandemic, we all knew our hospital was short-staffed. There was long waiting lines still. And this goes for any department at the hospital. whether it's the lab or whether it's nursing. It was shorthanded. And then after the pandemic and things started to open back up, the problem's only gotten worse. We've lost a lot of nurses to private company because of the impact of the management of the healthcare system here in town, from canceled vacations to getting burnout to working 16-hour shifts continuously. The amount of depression and anxiety that a lot of them are feeling, there's been just record amounts of people quitting within their first year, second year in the healthcare system, and that's just not acceptable to me. So there are first responders. They've helped us. They've certainly helped me and my family. And we can't be having surgeries like the one I was waiting for my foot, 10 months to get in, just to get a little bone chip taken out. So I think we need to look at how the hospitals run. The Campbell River Council should be the voice for the Campbell River residents. And even if the healthcare system is a provincial jurisdiction, we should be standing up for those people, and we should be loud, and we should be telling BC Health they got to do a better job for Campbell River. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson. How will reconciliation and decolonization inform your approach in working with our Indigenous communities?
Well, I think a lot of this is understanding the scope of the municipal government and the fact that the nations that exist in this area operate on a nation-to-nation basis with the federal government. So we need to work to inspire trust, cooperation, and work together with the nations, but we also have to understand that they are working on a different level than us, and we need to do what we can to work together, shared goals through protocol agreements, cooperative governance models, maybe creating partnership tables so we can work to build trust, we can find shared values, and we can address systemic inequality in our communities. But we do understand that they are operating on a different level. So we're not always entitled to everything that they do. And I think a lot of this too is when we look at what reconciliation means, there's a couple different definitions, and a lot of times we see reconciliation as our ability to give something back, but what was taken through colonization can never be returned or repaired. So we really do need to start from a place of building that trust, the collaboration, the cooperation, and then going from there and understanding our own role. So building stronger partnerships, but also kind of understanding the limits of what the municipal government can do.
Thank you. Candidate Milligan?
Yes, I agree entirely with candidate Donaldson that it is a nation to nation, or First Nations with our federal government. They don't need to consult with the city. But I would love it if they would want to consult with the city, because perhaps with a great partnership, we could do something better together. You know, I had a chat with Chief Darren Blaney from the Homoko, and he's planning on building a hotel, which makes me very happy because we do not have enough hotel space and hotel beds. But wouldn't it be great if the city knew that, except that Darren Blaney doesn't feel comfortable talking to the city because he's been slighted by them. We need to have respectful relationships. So that's at the governance level, but then there's the person-to-person level that I think everything we need to do should be informed by the intergenerational trauma and the negative impacts from residential schools and colonization in general. You know, it's a shameful history that I can't take away, but we need to acknowledge that those impacts are still happening every day. And as much as I would love it to, you know, I would like to be able to carry some of that pain to remove it from First Nations history. But I can't. So we need to be kind and respectful and acknowledge that background.
Thank you. Candidate Sterling.
Thank you. I think one of the greatest things that we can give to First Nations people in our community a lot of the time has to do with the economic opportunity to give them a higher quality of life. Through my job, I actually have worked with several organizations that help with First Nations businesses, whether it's starting them up or assisting them or dealing with the transition within the family of things. So I've worked with the Nachalnuth Economic Development Corporation, which deals with the whole North Island here, and they're a fantastic program for training and for lending. I've worked with TAC to help keep commercial fishing licenses and boats within the families of our First Nations that are around here to stop them from going into provincial incorporated companies that do not have Campbell River's best interest at heart. There's also Niviots here in town that does a lot of First Nations training, and I believe that's a great place to start as well too. They provide a lot of free training, and they've been a fantastic partner with us. So I would look more towards giving the economic step up to really help them out. And I think that the Willis Road band has actually, it should be a model that we should really be looking at. I've been fortunate enough to play lots of sports on their property, and that is a fantastic facility to play on. And they've got a great partnership with BC Hydro and Finning up there. I think that's one thing that should be commended, and we should be following that model. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chapman.
Thank you. When communities live in close proximity, whether their boundaries are coterminous or not, they need to have a dialogue between the communities because each community affects each other. The nice thing about running for council is I've taken the time and opportunity not only to talk to the people in downtown who are homeless, but I've also had an opportunity to talk to some of the First Nations leaders. And, you know, they have great ideas and great plans for economic development that they would like support on. And I think the city would like some support also. So we can form some pretty good partnerships, I think. We should be having at least quarterly meetings to deal with planning issues and future directions, zoning issues, and recreation. Now, that's just my view. The council would have to agree with that. But there's no reason why they couldn't have, there should be open dialogue of how we affect each other. We, working together, I don't think there's anything we can't overcome, but we have to work together. And they are more than willing to work together, and we should take that opportunity and run with it.
Thank you. And now, Candidate Milligan. Last week, I shared a current situation that's unfolding. Due to an impending apartment development, there will be an eviction on January 31st of an individual on disability and her sister who is retiring, and they will be evicted from their mobile home that has been their home for many years. At the moment, they literally have nowhere to go. There are no affordable available housing in Campbell River, and BC Housing has told them it is more than a 5-year wait for subsidized housing. Over the last 2 decades, countless municipalities throughout North America have gathered evidence that clearly demonstrates preventing homelessness is way more cost-effective than addressing it after housing is lost. What would you do to encourage a more diversified and affordable housing supply, such as requiring a certain percentage of new units in any building be subsidized and affordable? That's just one idea, but what ideas would you have?
Thank you. So first, I think it's really important that everybody has the numbers. The average household income in Campbell River is $70,000. The CMHC definition of affordable housing is not more than 30% of your income on housing. So that's $1,750 a month. The current house price in Campbell River last year was $761,000. With 20% down, 3% interest rate, that's $3,000 mortgage. Add another $500 a month for your property tax and your insurance, and the average house costs twice what the average income will buy. So unless you think housing prices are going to drop in half, our everyday housing stock is not affordable. Those numbers are really important as a background. So the number one thing to do is bring back the secondary suite bylaw. It was put in place, our city staff did the work in 2019, it went to public consultation, and our current council rejected it in February of 2020. The secondary suites provide more income, tax income. They provide a huge potential inventory of affordable housing. And when mortgage terms come due and our interest rates have increased significantly, secondary suite is going to allow seniors and families to keep their home and not become homeless. Other things like density bonusing allow a developer to put in more units, and some of those units are non-market housing. Many more tools exist for municipal governments.
Thank you. Candidate Sterling.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes.
Or
So
just quickly, sorry.
just the question part. Okay. So what would you do to encourage a more diversified and affordable housing supply, such as a certain percentage of new units in any building must be subsidized and affordable, but what else? Other ideas do you have?
Yeah, I think we really need to get behind the developers on this and opening up the land that has been restricted, as Mr. Chapman had said, since about 2017. The backlog on this is brutal, but there's a lot of things from the federal level too that have come into play with this, as far as lax interest rate policy and things like that, that have really caused the spike in housing, and that is above what we are able to do here in Campbell River about that. But I do think that we should be increasing the supply. I do think that there should be a proper policy in place with those developers for the lower earned income people, and including the pensioners. So we really have to decide, especially right now, it is a unit by unit basis of who we want to bring and who we want to help in Campbell River to create the fabric of a good society here. And unfortunately, we are not able to help everybody because the demand is just too high with the existing supply that we're even allowed to build at the current pace. So I do think that the secondary suite option should definitely be looked at, but we should really be keeping in mind the city services and the impact to the neighboring properties. I think that really needs to be looked at. I know that a lot of my family members and people here in town, you know, they'll have a secondary suite go in, and then all of a sudden there's 6 cars parked in front of their house and it's loud. So I think we have to take that into account as well. And yeah, it's a supply issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chapman.
Thank you. New subdivisions in the city are automatically zoned for secondary suites. Secondary suites is not a policy I would advocate for current subdivisions. The prime reason is the sewage and water capacity was not ever designed for higher capacity. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't take say a subdivision of 40 homes and have a lottery or whatever you want and say, okay, 3 could or 4 could. But to have a blanket policy where everyone can would be irresponsible. What we can do, and what has been done in other communities, is work with BC Housing. Some communities have purchased 1 to 2 units in a development that was designed for low cost, affordable housing, and financed with BC Housing money, and also created in these apartment blocks or condominiums, the ground floor, a part of the ground floor was daycare room. And I think we should be pursuing something along those lines. We may not be able to make a big dent, but I think we could get some subsidized housing in developments. I think we could have some secondary suites, but we need to build new homes in areas where secondary suites are foreseen.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson.
So I support blanket application of secondary suites because it is the most utilized housing intervention in the province. I know that we do allow secondary suites in new builds, but I consider that to be a means test because only people who can afford to build a new house can afford to have a secondary suite. I don't think that that's fair for the rest of us who live in the older neighborhoods and also may need help with our mortgages or want to provide greater housing alternatives for our students and our seniors and people who need lower cost housing. Second, when we talk about expanding the development of new single-family homes, Campbell River has a lot of single-family homes, and the benchmark cost for a single-family home is over $700,000. When you look at how much that costs per year in a mortgage, which is about $44,000 to afford a mortgage at 10% down and a 4.3% interest rate, you find that there's only about 3,000 families, or 3,775 families in Campbell River that can afford that based on the 2021 census. So that means there's over 11,000 families in Campbell River that may never own a single family home based on their current income. So I really think we need to look at alternatives. We need to look at different types of housing stock. We need to look at townhouses, duplexes, infill, carriage houses, responsible infill, not blanket. We need to look at it very, very carefully. This is complicated. And we should have a great planning department who can help us with this. Also, the city may want to look at investing in their own housing. I lived in a city of Vancouver market value rental. It was awesome. Cities can acquire land and build housing, and we should look at that alternative for our community.
Thank you. With an eye to the current situation downtown, this is a yes or no question, starting with candidate Sterling. Are you in favor of a long and short-term mental health facility being built in Campbell River?
Not within the downtown core, no.
Well, I didn't say downtown, like anywhere. The issue at downtown is that it's been identified by a lot of the social services that a lot of people are struggling with mental health. So we currently don't have a mental health facility. As long as it was being built somewhere other than downtown, would you support it?
Yeah, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've looked at with mental health, a lot of the problems that we're having with the homeless people and the mental health issue definitely stem back to when the provincial government was closing a lot of the health facilities that helped a lot of those people. One of the things that I was looking at just one day online, I just thought maybe this might be a good idea, is the former Lakeview property that was converted into a school by the South Korean government, I believe. That would be a fantastic center there where people could get help and be away from a lot of their vices. And it's a safe area. They could learn life skills such as gardening, landscaping. They're in a safe environment, and it's far enough away from town that they could get the help they need and stay away from the problems until they are better. I think it's something like that is what we should be looking at. Having stuff downtown, it just isn't working. It's making stuff dangerous for people. There was a gentleman over COVID that was stabbed in the old bank where I worked at. People are afraid to go down to the banks now at night. His employees being assaulted. There's high school students in stores getting hurt. We have to consider all of society for this, and the existing plan is not working. And so I'd be in favor of looking at a facility, but it should be very specialized, and it should take into account the community as well, too. We should not all be living in fear downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chapman.
My answer is shorter.
Okay.
I agree with candidate Sterling, yes.
Okay. Candidate Donaldson.
Yes, Campbell River doesn't even have a psychiatric ward in our hospital. I'd say we need some more support.
Okay. And candidate Milligan.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Now, homeless impacts our community's safety, health, businesses, visitors, and the city's finite resources. What new ideas and solutions will you bring to City Council to tackle this growing issue? Candidate Chapman.
Well, this is as I said before in my opening remarks, it's a complex issue. Do you have some people who basically are homeless because they don't have enough money? Some are homeless because of drug addiction. Some are homeless, well, there's many categories. And the first thing we need to do is increase, I'm hesitant to say enforcement, but we need ambassadors downtown to prevent vandalism and make people feel safe to be there. That's a short-term solution. The long-term solution is what candidate Sterling said. We need to, we don't need to kick these people to the curb and abuse them. They need help. We can help them. And by helping them, we're helping ourselves and the business community and the people who want to come downtown. I've talked to many people and they're afraid to come downtown. So we need more security people to help move people along, not let them congregate in areas, in certain areas, and try to be kind.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson.
So I think we need to work collaboratively with other levels of government to advocate for programs and services that meet our community's needs in a responsible way. This could be advocating for better treatment and recovery services, better mental health facilities. We could look at other social service options. This leads into getting people the right services and spaces at the right time. So we need better coordination. A lot of times people go to the hospital to detox, but there's no treatment bed waiting for them, and then they go back to the street. And there's nothing more discouraging than that. So we need to make sure that we have the services available for people when they need them and where they need them. We do need to work on public safety. We need to work to make sure it's contemporary, resourced appropriately, and working as intended. Right now, our RCMP office is understaffed, our bylaw is understaffed, and we've already had one security company leave the downtown because they could not staff it appropriately. So we have some staffing concerns. There's some really cool alternative models. There's Car 67, which is a mental health response vehicle. There's a peer-engaged outreach model in Victoria. Candidate for Mayor Larry Sampson in his debate also mentioned a Maple Ridge model that also looks very interesting. So there are some really interesting models for community policing out there. We could redesign existing programs like the CEPTED, the Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design program, and the Facade Improvement Zone. Those ones are underutilized. And we could look at work programs like Embers and Coast Mental Health. They have awesome models in the Lower Mainland. People respond well to work and capacity building.
Thank you. Candidate Milligan.
So often the criminal aspect of people who are unhoused get mixed up with it. So I just want to deal with them separately. And just to touch very lightly on the criminal activity, thank goodness last week we got a good piece of news with the release of a government commission report on the 21st that led to immediate action by the province. And they're bringing back the prolific offender management program. This change brings hope. We've got, some 75 people on the street with an expensive habit that is fueled by crime. And our RCMP have been strapped by federal legislation to release on bail rather than maintain incarcerated. So hopefully that change will provide our RCMP with the tools they need to keep repeat offenders off the street. Separate to that is the issue of homelessness. Number one, again, vision to action. We need to unite under a common vision and then develop a clear action plan to meet that vision. So the first thing is, I think we can all agree that no one wants to see people living unhoused in our downtown or anywhere in Campbell River. Once we agree on that vision, we could start to work towards solutions. The first thing is to work with social service providers. So our current council, just in the last few weeks, met for the first time the Coalition to End Homelessness after a repeat request for a meeting. They gave her 10 minutes to give a presentation, whereas she had hoped for a half day of dialogue. And so she gave her presentation and she was asked questions, but she wasn't provided the opportunity to ask questions back. And that was the first time our current city councils actually met with social service providers. Collaborative approach would be much further ahead. Number one action could be to set up a temporary shelter. We can see what Duncan has just done and what Port Alberni is starting to do. We can learn from those projects that have created positive change to getting people housed. We've got this great program of the turtle pods, the portable sleeping pods that could be expanded to at least help people stay safe at night.
Thank you, Candidate Milligan. Thank you. Candidate Donaldson. Reducing car dependency and improving options for different modes of transportation has been proven to have... Did I miss you?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I jumped ahead. My apologies. Okay, go ahead, Candidate Sterling.
Yeah, no worries, thank you. I've actually done quite a bit of research on this. I've been doing a lot of research into the projects that they've been using down in the States in places like Chicago, Hawaii, the Tenderloin District in San Francisco, and even with Dallas, to see kind of what works and what doesn't work. And I think until BC Housing and Island Health decide to work together and take this seriously, that's where our biggest issue is. There's no working with Campbell River on this, so they basically just run roughshed and do as they please. So sorry. yeah, it's just, we need to deal with a lot of the homeless in unconventional ways. One of the things that hasn't been talked about is slowing the supply of people that have been coming to town. Our mental health services are completely overstretched. It's taking about 90 days to get in to see a BC mental health counselor, and that's far too long. I think we need to slow that down first, and then when we get a hold of the people and help them within our community, then we could look at reaching out beyond that. But until we get caught up here in town, I really think we need to slow down that supply and make it very publicly well known that if people are going to come here, you're not in a position to get help right now. You have things that are violent happening to people, like the poor person that was lit on fire under the bridge. Those people aren't getting help by coming here or having their communities dump them in our community for help. So I think that's one thing that really needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I missed you. Candidate Donaldson. Reducing car dependency and improving options for different modes of transportation has been proven to have economic, health, environment, and livability benefits. In light of the growing climate emergency, what specific actions would you support to increase active and alternative transportation?
Well, many people know we have the Master Transportation Review out for consultation and review. That's going to be a really great place to start. Outside of that, we have to start somewhere. Right now, we're letting perfection be the enemy of progress, in the words of Churchill, and we're not really getting anything done on this front. So we need to look at bringing in bike lanes, making them part of the general infrastructure upgrades and maintenance plan. If we had an asset management plan, I would advocate for making sure that active transportation was considered alongside regular and routine maintenance in our community. We need to have shovel-ready projects available for when the grants come out. There's a lot of provincial and federal grants for this type of work, and we're missing them because we don't have the projects ready to go. We need to coordinate with better stakeholders. We have a lot of really amazing groups of cycling advocacy committees, and we have the youth group out of Carey High, or Southgate, I think, Timberline. They did a presentation at council. There's a lot of active stakeholders in this, and we really need to work with them to make sure that they're involved in the process and advocating for what they need. I went to a Go By Bike Week event at Phoenix, and I had to park 3 blocks so that I could ride my bike there with my kids because it wasn't safe to actually ride there. There's no good transit route to the schools there. I also happen to live on a road that doesn't have a sidewalk to the Seawalk. I live on Erickson. It's a death trap. So we need better active transit.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Milligan.
Well, this is one of the reasons I'm running for City Council. I've been advocating to City Council for the last 5 years to implement their existing master transportation plan. In that plan, there is a table that has 28 sections of road that should have a bike lane put on it. This plan was written in 2012, and now not a single one of those has a bike lane yet. Even though some of those roads have been ripped up and paved for other purposes, there is no process in place such that when the road is being repaved for whatever reason because of underground infrastructure works, there's no connection between city departments. There's no checklist where they say, oh, should there be a bike lane here? Should we take this as an opportunity to improve our alternative transportation? And so what happened, Hidden Harbor Hill was being ripped up, and I was asked for a letter of support for Greenways to support the project. And I said, oh, but of course you're going to put a bike lane on top. Oh, no, we're not. Actually, it's not part of the scope of the project. And so I make a presentation to City Council and we get our bike lane. I'm thinking things are changing. The road is repaved, Highway 19A, all along from the top of Hidden Harbor Hill into town. No bike lane. Again, I end up having to go to the newspaper, and then the bike lane comes on. There's tons of provincial money. Every other community in Vancouver Island has got that money except Campbell River because we have not put in a plan. And our staff did actually just put in a plan, and I got by email today, I found out that even though the staff just worked for months to put in an application for alternative funding from the province, City Council's decided not to go ahead with it.
Thank you, Candidate Milligan. Candidate Sterling.
Thank you. I think the transportation issue with the environment there's a couple of moving parts that should be addressed for this year. One of them with the new building that I'm moving into, is going to be mixed-use commercial with residential. I think if we increase things like that downtown, it'll be a lot better for the environment because you won't have as much traffic and people will actually be living in the downtown core where they can just walk or bike to work. As far as other things for biking, it should be pretty easy for us to utilize a lot of the wide roads that we have here in Campbell River for dedicated spots for riding bikes, but taking into account the parking that a lot of places need, especially if there's an increase in the secondary suites. Other ideas as well. Downtown Vancouver, you'll see Shaw bikes everywhere with a bike sharing program. That's one thing there, using technology and apps where you have bikes that are readily available and can be shared between spots and they're locked up for safety so they don't get stolen. So that's maybe one option as well too for people that might not be able to afford a bike. Another option as well too for helping with the congestion might be taking a look at ride sharing possibilities. We know with a lot of the people in our community right now, you'll see a lot of Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes people looking to earn a little extra money on the side, and perhaps working with companies like Uber and Lyft. There may be an opportunity as well there too, because a lot of the time people just drive their vehicle to work and then it's just sitting there as a dead asset basically. And so yeah, with the ride sharing, that could help ease up congestion as well and be better for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chapman.
Well, this is going to be hard to answer in 90 seconds.
Do your best.
The Master Transportation Plan was created a long time ago and is set on shelves and collected dust. It needs to be reviewed, it needs to be reactivated. I like bike lanes. I don't ride bikes often, but I do like the fact that bikes have a certain path to travel on when I'm driving my truck or car. We need to look at BC Transit routes as well, because while some places are not safe to travel on, some buses have the bike racks in front of the bus so they can put the bikes on and get off at certain points where they can ride safely. Campbell River is long and narrow, and it's just a reality. It is a challenge for us. The federal and provincial governments have been very clear. Unless you have a capital asset management plan, you will not qualify for major grants. When I was working for the city in 2010, I started to put the bones together for a capital asset management plan. That was 2010. That was 12 years ago, and we still don't have a plan. We need that as a priority so we can qualify for grants that are coming up for climate reduction alternate transportation plans.
Thank you. Okay. Candidate Milligan. This will be the last question from me, and then after this, you each get to ask a question of each other. So the last question from myself is from the general public. I should say that all of these questions have been gathered through email over the last couple of weeks. Food insecurity has become a daily challenge for many families due to the astronomical inflation. What ideas do you have to address increased small agriculture to feed our community?
Well, again, we have a wonderful agricultural plan, another plan that sits on the shelf and hasn't been implemented. So I think a really important action of council is to ensure that there's one city staff person who's champion for each particular plan and brings it forward quarterly or biannually to update city council on what's been done to implement that particular plan. Part of the agricultural plan is to put in place community gardens, and the city did work with Greenways Land Trust. I was the lead in the build phase of Mountain View Community Garden in 2019, for which many community organizations came together with donations of labor and services and materials. So we have 42 beds there where people are growing food now when before they couldn't grow their own food. We can also ensure that any ALR land is used for agriculture. So we've got not very much ALR compared to the Comox Valley, but whatever is there should be used to be growing food. I know there's a big chunk of land in the north. Would you like landfill on that ALR, or would you like food to be grown? In terms of our economic development office, they've done a great job to recruit cubic farms to come to Campbell River, where they're going to be manufacturing these indoor grow apparatus, but also producing local food. I think we need to be able to encourage, recruit, and encourage more farming happening in town, and using that produce to support the Good Food Box program.
Thank you. Candidate Sterling.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as the food security, I know that was a big topic that the college was looking at before COVID ended up happening. We should be looking at a lot more community gardening. I have one just down the road from my parents' place, and it's fantastic. There's a lot of volunteers that put in work, and it produces very fresh and healthy food. I also think, too, that we should be, like Ms. Milligan was saying, keeping that ALR land as farms, and that's a lot more local food that's not having to be trucked around and that we're having to bring in from other countries, so it gives us more of a security with that as well too. I also think too that something needs to be done as far as what's going on with a lot of our seafood stuff with the fishing and the urchins and crab. Seems that a lot of our local catch and the highest quality stuff seems to be going down to Washington State or out of the country, and I believe that there should be a good market here for that, and we should be looking to assist to keep healthy proteins like that here in our community. So, thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chapman.
Thank you. I agree with candidate Sterling. We're shipping off way too much. The local farmers markets are healthy and growing slowly, but I think as an overall strategy, we need to recognize that we have very fertile land from here right down to the Cowichan Valley, even past the Cowichan Valley. And I would like to see the regional districts come together and come up with a strategy of encouraging farmland, because there is some farmland in the city, but it's mainly in the rural area, in the regional district. And believe it or not, the city is part of the regional district. We need to have these regional districts working together and come up with a strategy so that we can encourage people to farm their land. The other thing is the backyard garden is a great idea. People don't know that they can build a little greenhouse in their backyard of 10 feet by 10 feet without a building permit. And I think that knowledge should be given out readily. I think some greenhouse designs should be provided for free. The city could buy it, the regional districts could buy it and hand it out so people would know how to build a safe, productive greenhouse. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, candidate Donaldson, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I was lucky enough to do a project a few years ago with the Strathcona Food Security Network. I learned a lot about food security. It's a lot bigger than community gardens. A lot of it is about building resilience into our local food systems. Most of our island communities only have about a 3-day supply of fresh food. So some of that is actually rooted in building in cold storage and better food storage capabilities in our communities. That's actually one of the big barriers to getting commercial fishing off the dock, is a lot of commercial fishermen have really high validation and monitoring fees, and then they have to offload their boats, put it into cold storage, and then sell it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. My dad still fishes. So we really need to build resilience. We could have better cold storage that would help dramatically in our community. We also need better kitchen services. We could have commissary kitchens, so we could do more with food diversion. It's about providing for our vulnerable population, so that we see that playing out in the downtown community kitchen. But that could be expanded and relocated into sort of a purpose-built facility where we could have more training for people downtown. We could divert food out of grocery stores that it's kind of nearing when it goes bad, and turn it into meals for seniors and people that are facing food insecurity. There's also some structural barriers around farm meats, slaughter-safe regulations, and so how can we kind of bring that abattoir process into our communities and make it easier for farmers to slaughter and produce their own meat? So it is quite structural. Like I said, I got a garden. I love it. I started it during COVID. So backyard gardening and community gardens is huge. There is underutilized land in the school system. Given the right infrastructure, probably could be expanded. But we do have a food security network, and if you're interested in this, I would encourage you to get involved. They're really awesome.
Thank you. And now we enter part 2 where each of you get to ask a question of another candidate. The question is of your choosing, and the candidate is of your choosing. And so we will begin with candidate Sterling. Who's your question for, and what is it?
Thank you. My question is going to be for candidate Donaldson. What's your advice to the business owners, employees, customers, and seniors downtown who are currently facing the vandalism, threats, the assaults? What's your advice to those people today about how to deal with that?
I work downtown. I rent a space for my little company out of the Campbell River co-working space. And I think that downtown is really complex. There is obviously the businesses are under a tremendous amount of pressure. I think the city should provide better resources for them for cleanup and security. I do. I think we have capacity issues in that department. I also think we need to work better together to kind of get to the root of these problems. The Nuns Creek situation was horrifically managed. People are not given an adequate place to camp or stay. We've not come up with a good solution for dealing with this. And everybody was dispersed very quickly, and it really did amplify the problem in our downtown. So there's no good solution to this. It's really sad and depressing, and it's something I deal with on a pretty much daily basis. But I do think we can get through it. I think we should restructure our CEPTED program. That's the Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design program. That is designed to help businesses better organize their architectural environment to eliminate and reduce crime. But right now, there's too many barriers in that program, so they can't access it. So that's a really big area where we could actually improve our local policies. But yes, I do spend a lot of time downtown. It's really complicated, and it's a struggle. I don't know if any of us have a good solution down there, but I'm willing to try.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
No, thanks.
Okay. Candidate Chapman, do you have a question, and who's it for?
I have a question for candidate Donaldson. We're going to put you to work here tonight.
Oh, bring it on.
I think you mentioned that you're all about density and infill.
Yes.
And when density and infill have proven to be costly compared and complicated compared to the single detached home in neighborhoods, how do you plan on increasing housing with infill when the city no longer has an engineering staff or experience available?
Well, I would first work to create a better organizational culture so that our staff was retained in our system. I agree with you. We have lost a lot of incredible humans in the city as of late. In terms of making infill more desirable to developers, there's a number of things that we could do, and a lot of them would involve working with the developers. Campbell River has one of the highest parking minimums right now, so we actually require 1.3 stalls per apartment building and 2 stalls per townhouse. This is quite a big barrier to developers, and I actually believe when we look at the supply and demand model for parking, developers actually know a lot better than we do how many parking units their buildings need in order to be saleable or rentable to the public. So I think there's a lot of ways we can work with developers to make it more beneficial to them to develop infill. Another one is looking at setbacks in a responsible way, looking at minimum lot size, and looking at implementing more micro units and looking at kind of the suite sizes that we have. So there's a lot of ways that we can make infill development more appealing to developers. We just need to work with them to figure out how to do it. But yes, you are right. Greenfield development is the cheapest and easiest way to develop, but it's also more expensive in the long run for our community when it comes to maintaining the infrastructure.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Just one. If we get our transportation plan together and have developments, like I say, clusters of houses, so we have proper planned transportation routes, whether it's bike lanes or transit, do you think then that the parking requirements should be reduced for those people living in those areas where transit and alternate transportation is increased, or should leave it the same?
I think doing a regional assessment of parking minimums would be appropriate in our community. Our parking minimums are kind of regionally high when you look at other jurisdictions. And yes, looking at areas of greater density and having fewer, structuring the parking minimums based on the nature of the community is something I would agree with, yes. And it is, when we look at the supply and demand model, much more appropriate to actually have the developers' feedback in this. Many communities actually put parking maximums on their developments, but we still have parking minimums.
Thank you. And candidate Donaldson, do you have a question, and who is it for?
I got a question for Doug Chapman, candidate Chapman. So what role do you see public art and creative placemaking having in downtown safety?
Well, we have a public art policy, or at least there is one, and it was pulled.
That was a big topic on last
Yeah,
week.
that's
It's
right.
sitting on a shelf. It's never been enacted.
Never enacted.
I don't
Isn't
know if
that
it
a
was
shame?
completed.
Well, although I'm old, when I was younger, I played guitar, I played drums, played the trumpet, played the saxophone, and sometimes played the fool. And I think public art is important, and I'm disappointed to hear it's still on the shelf. We need to, when I say public art, there's a lot of public art we could participate in, we could have, without having major budget impacts on the city. We have organizations in town who advocate and encourage this to happen without any cost to the city at all. So, I'm disappointed in it, but that is something we can work on as a new council. As soon as we get some budget items lined up and looked after, get the capital asset management plan finalized, and the nice to haves may have to come afterwards.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I had added the downtown safety clause, and I was hoping that would actually elevate the conversation around public art. There was an organization in LA that installed public art on graffiti or on construction fences, and they saw a 96% reduction in graffiti. When we look at broken windows theory, we see that actually introducing public art to a space can make a space look better and then actually reduce perceptions of disorder. So if we look at public art as a component of public safety, would you support elevating that in the budget cycle?
If it could be shown where it would do that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Milligan, do you have a question for someone, and who is it for, and what is the question?
Yes, I have a question for candidate Chapman. So correct me if I'm wrong when you answer this question. You've talked about increasing growth, particularly by expanding the urban containment boundary and having more single-family houses. I'm wondering how what kind of evidence you're using to justify this approach, given that single-family zoning has been prohibited in California this year on the grounds that it's no longer financially justifiable. And in fact, in major cities across North America, they're looking at no longer supporting any kind of single-family zoning to be created.
I'm having difficulty hearing. You said that there's buildings in California that were not permitted to be built anymore. Which buildings were those? Single-family homes?
No, in California, so statewide, they now prohibit the creation of single-family zoning because it's not financially justifiable. So I'm wondering, basically, what is your evidence to support your statement that we need to expand the urban containment boundary and make more single-family homes?
I don't think I said we should expand our boundaries. I just think development permits and subdivision applications that are out there should be processed. I know we have a lack of staff to do that. Some of those are for multifamily homes or proposed for single-family homes. And if it's a matter of a shortage, I think as an interim measure, we could hire outside consultants to come in, do the research work that's needed so approval can be given for these. You know, it's interesting you raised that because there was a model proposed in, I think it was around 2002, where subdivisions were not approved unless it could be proven they could pay for themselves. So the cities would be able to determine how much it costs to plow the snow, maintain the water and sewer and curb and gutter and streetlights, and determine what it was going to cost to service that subdivision, then calculate what the tax back was going to come back to the city, and if it wasn't a positive figure, it wouldn't be approved. Now, I notice a lot of communities have gone away from that, but I believe Campbell River is ripe for multifamily housing, duplexes, fourplexes, and apartments, more condos, and higher density would be best.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I have a follow-up. So to get evidence to understand exactly what you just said in terms of does it pay to put single-family housing in on undeveloped land, I connected with the executive director of Asset Management BC, Wally Wells, and he said to me, any finance officer in any local government will tell you that single-family housing does not pay its way. Would you agree with that statement?
I'd have to know in which context that was given and what municipality it is. In some cases it does. For instance, in Whistler, it would not make sense at all. In Campbell River, I haven't studied it. I would be surprised if it did pay its own way, but I bet it would be pretty close. And again, we'd have to study that. That's part of council policy decision, and that's where some strong leadership is needed. We need to determine what it is we want as a community. If we want more multi-residential housing, which I think we should have, we need to really focus on intensifying and not being afraid to go to the townhomes. I'm not afraid to going to the larger complexes so we can house people. I can see in the future that a single-family residential unit is going to be a luxury because simply no one can afford them. Not only the city in servicing them, but people paying the cost to live in a single-family house is going to be a rare occasion, I think, in the future. So I like the densification. I like the increased availability of housing through that methodology.
Candidate Sterling, do you have a question, and who is it for?
No, I do not at this time. Thanks.
I'm sorry?
I don't have another
Oh,
question.
you don't have another question. Okay. Candidate Chapman, do you have a question for somebody?
We're allowed 2 questions?
Yeah.
Bonus. My question would be to candidate Milligan. How would you handle inflation in terms of how they would plan, in terms of how you would plan for a slowdown and keep taxes low, but keep services?
So in terms of our current challenges, the big rock that everybody talks about, you can increase taxes or increase revenue. And so number one, again, secondary suites. If all the suites have been created in the last 2 years would have been legal suites instead of illegal suites, we would have more income. Second, we don't push our urban containment boundary because it's going to be a net loss. So all the data I've looked at, the evidence suggests that building new homes on undeveloped land is a net loss, whereas building infill using existing infrastructure is a net gain. Number two, we get a grant writer on city council. We have had so many grant opportunities that have been lost that are opportunities that still exist. And if we get a grant writer on city council, or on city staff, which many municipalities do have, it would quickly pay for itself because we wouldn't be passing up the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of provincial and federal funds that are available to us. So that would be bringing revenue in to carry out good infrastructure projects.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Candidate Milligan, the city operates a water system which pays for itself. It operates a sewer system that pays for itself. Why should the airport be treated differently?
I'm sorry, you want the airport to pay for itself? That's what your question is?
Why would well, if we have utilities that are what's called self-liquidating, or they pay for themselves, why is the airport not paying for itself?
I haven't looked over that budget in great detail. That's a good question. That is not one that I've examined. On the water, though, and the sewer, I can say that there are some great spreadsheets that allow people to compare municipalities, and the length of our water and sewer per capita is longer than it should be. So, we have a spread out city that costs us, if it pays for itself, that's amazing, because we have a lot more water and sewer lines than most municipalities do per capita. So it's a little bit bewildering to me. It doesn't make sense to me. Actually, I would have to fact check the fact that those services pay for themselves, because on paper, it doesn't look like the water and sewer pay for themselves. But the airport, certainly there's a lot more opportunity there. It's in now with the Economic Development Office. And I think that Economic Development Office, I know Rose Klukas is probably going to be able to make some more money from that project.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson, do you have a question, and who is it for?
Sure, I don't think candidate Sterling's had one yet. So tourism is a pretty big industry here in Campbell River, and it does contribute quite a bit of money to our MRDT. What would you do to support the tourism industry in Campbell River, should you be elected to council?
Thank you for your question. Probably about a third of the businesses that I help at work are actually in the tourism industry, and they have been hammered, especially by federal government policy regarding the pandemic. A lot of the cancellations or the uncertainty from the leadership of the province around the Christmas time, when a lot of the tourism businesses have to book their clients, the uncertainty around that basically kills the entire summer. So when the provincial government delays things and then all of a sudden allows a tourism season in April, it's already too late for a lot of these businesses. So a lot of them have been reaching out for a lot of help. There's programs like ours that are available to help them through those times. And we should also be promoting Campbell River as well too, for tourism, using like Destination BC, Destination Campbell River, programs like that. So yeah, I'm definitely an advocate. I've created a ton of businesses in this town for the tourism industry, and I'm even working with groups like the ATV Club here in town, where they've had problems accessing trails through Crown land and private land. So things like that, innovative approaches in different tourism businesses. I love to create that diversified experience for people here in Campbell River. So yeah, I'm a strong advocate for the tourism business, and I'm personally involved with that quite a bit. So thank you.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. The city of Campbell River has a tourism advisory committee, and I'm just wondering what your ideas are when we look at incorporating the feedback of advisory committees into community decision making, and how they should be kind of incorporated to our policy development processes. Because we do have an advisory group for tourism. How would you listen to them in your day-to-day decision making?
A lot of my experience in dealing with businesses and dealing with federal, provincial, and municipal governments, the best thing that we can do as government most often is get out of the way and let people that are intelligent and that are actually in that industry make the decisions, bring them forward to us, and then we give them the support for that. Similar to my stance on art, you know, I don't think it should take a public policy to create an art program here in town. I think we have plenty of awesome artists everything from like the art battle to the chainsaw carving, things like that. Those people are the experts. They should be coming to us and we should be supporting them. We should not be trying to tell everybody what to do. We should not be creating associations to tell businesses what to do. Those people that operate those businesses know that business inside and out, and they should just be receiving our support. We should not be telling them or getting in their way. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Milligan, do you have a question, and who would it be for?
Sure. I would like to ask one of Gwen. So hypothetical situation, a person who supported your campaign is passionate about installation of a particular piece of infrastructure, let's say a stop sign or a sidewalk somewhere in their neighborhood. What do you do in response to their request to get it done?
I think that would be a conflict of interest per se. I think I would follow normal governance practices. Like I don't have, as a city councilor, you don't have direct decision-making skills, and you shouldn't be going over the heads of city staff. You should just be taking the evidence that you get and making the best decision for the community. So it's not like you can just get it done when you're on city council. There's a system that you have to follow and procedures. So I would probably make that very clear to that donor, because that sounds like somebody that's stepping out of line, maybe. Yeah, I think we all need to work in our interpersonal relationships. Obviously, this is like we all have dynamics, but there are processes at the city that need to be followed, and yeah, donor relationships should not override that. They shouldn't play a role in decision making at all.
Do you have a follow-up question, Candidate Milligan?
And sure, so just as a follow-up, do you believe a city councilor is speaking for everyone in the community or for the people who share their same vision?
I believe a city councilor needs to consult the public, take into consideration jurisdictional scans, literature reviews, look at all of the evidence, look at the recommendations of city staff, and work with the other councilors on their committee to make the best decision for our community in a transparent way that's done in public, so that everybody can see what's being done and can ask the appropriate questions. So I think, yes, you do represent the community in a sense, but you really need to take all of the information and make the best decision in a transparent way together with the rest of your councilors. I mean, we're going to have differences at the table here, and that's the goal, because we all need to work together to build a better Campbell River.
Thank you. Candidate Sterling, do you have a question for somebody?
Yes, for Ms. Milligan. The problems in California with construction, their electrical grid, environmental issues, do you think a lot of that is because of poor government planning?
I can't say I have very direct firsthand experience for what's going on in California, but you know, challenges of resource distribution are not unique to California. Our planet is reaching its limit. I'm a biologist, and basically, you know, you get a population growth curve and we're way up there. Growth curves start out exponential and then they crash because the habitat can no longer provide all the resources to all the individuals, and there's too much waste. And that's the reality of it. And so really, collectively, as a human population, and particularly as humans in a developed nation, we need to use our resources less. I mean, that's really the reality of it. How that's going to happen could happen in a relatively calm and collective way if government steps in, because you know, humans love to use as many resources as we can, and we're not going to stop using our resources unless somebody really makes it hard to keep doing that. So I believe there is a very strong role for government to play in ensuring equity in resource use across the whole planet, never mind just in Canada.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. Same for Mrs. Milligan. When the Hoover Dam was built, the population of California was about 6 or 7 million people. Today, their population is larger than the entire country of Canada. Plus, you have all these outlying cities and water-intensive crops that are using up much of the water supply, resulting in record lows with Lake Mead, Lake Powell, etc. It's almost getting to the point where Las Vegas may not have a power supply coming from that dam because of the low water supply. Do you blame that situation on climate change, or do you blame that on poor government policy?
I would say that's just basic human nature.
Could you maybe expand that answer just a little bit?
Well, again, you know, we're humans and we have this high opinion of ourselves, but we are animals and we use all the resources we can. And so, you know, and we're not going to stop using our resources unless we put a social system in place to continually check ourselves. That's one of the reasons I want to be on city council. I want to be part of like checking ourselves, like just, you know, like let's look at what's going on around us and just slow down, be kind to each other, and just, you know, take a step back and realize that we can be on this planet with this many people if we have social systems in place to ensure equity.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Chapman, do you have another question for somebody?
I can't think of anything right at the moment.
Okay. Candidate Donaldson?
Yeah, I've got one more for candidate Milligan. There. Candidate Milligan, if you were on council last term, what is a decision that you would have done differently and why?
Oh, hands down the secondary sweep bylaw. Hands down. You know, it's just one more example of the fact that city council asked their staff to do something. Their staff did it. It went to public consultation. The majority of residents were in favor. It is the most used tool of all municipalities in BC. We're one of only 3 without a secondary sweep bylaw. It provides revenue, property tax revenue. It ensures an affordable housing inventory, and it provides people the opportunity to increase income. Like hands down, that is a decision that I really feel for Claire Mogilov. She was the only one who spoke in opposition to that decision, and everyone else voted against a secondary sweep bylaw. And I think it's one of the reasons why we have no affordable housing inventory right now.
Do you have a follow-up?
No. Nope, not at this time.
Okay. Candidate Milligan, do you have a final question for somebody?
No, I'm good, thank you.
So I have one more question that I can ask.
I'll ask a question then.
Okay, go ahead.
You just really want this to be 2 hours long, don't you, Mary Ruth? I will ask a question. Okay. I will ask candidate Sterling this one. Assume the worst has happened. We've had the major earthquake, the tsunami, the zombie apocalypse, whatever it might be. What is it that you're going to do? What will be your role in the community in the aftermath of such a disaster to help us work through recovery and ensure our social systems get put back in place to care for each other?
Thanks. And yeah, I would enjoy being part of a zombie apocalypse because I believe I'm a survivor and I'd be great for any team to help you out. So yeah, part of the programs that we run throughout the province, we have a disaster response business continuity plan. So I believe that's one thing there that is really good in conjunction with insurance companies, provincial and federal governments, as well as local organizations. So a lot of the time, if something big were to happen such as that, there's going to be outside organizations at the provincial or federal level that are going to be involved. So at the municipal level, you basically help where you can. My focus would probably be on a lot of the housing, people that are being displaced, perhaps setting up things like the emergency bedding in a community center and things along those lines, but also getting the businesses back up and running. That's a really important one there. We have to get those and the services up, make sure that people still have their livelihoods, because that's one thing that's often gets left out is a lot of that. It's quite important. We've seen with the interior wildfires, the flooding, things along those lines there. It's usually business people that kind of get the last sort of bit of help. And with the amount of people that they employ and things along those lines there, that's where my specialty does lie. So thank you.
Candidate Milligan?
Yes, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say earlier, candidate Sterling, that you think government should stay out of people's lives. So perhaps given your answer to the last question, you think government should be part of people's lives?
Well, when you have a big natural disaster like that, it's completely different than something along the lines of having an advocacy policy just here in Campbell River. So yes, I do believe that the government should get out of the way most of the time. We have plenty of businesses. There's extremely intelligent people in this community that can bring ideas, and we should be looking to support them. But we should not be having the government telling us what to do. And we shouldn't become that dependent that we're always looking to the government for solutions. There are very smart organizations, there are very smart people in this community that are being held back by a lot of government restriction, whether it's permits, bylaws, things along those lines there. I've seen businesses that were trying to get started up, such as a daycare, take 8 months to get a permit from the city. The fire department was confused as far as the approval of that, so that caused another hang up. And then you had to wait for Island Health to come up from Victoria. So things along those lines there. Every time you try to get the government involved in more programs like that, they just don't have a good track record. I prefer more of a freedom-based approach. And the government track record just on dealing with things is just not, it's just not conclusive to getting things done. So they usually cause more damage than they end up trying to help. So thank you.
Okay, now we will go to closing statements, and candidate Sterling, you will be up first with your closing statement. I just want to thank each of you once again for participating tonight. It's been a pleasure to have you, and thank you again for running for council. Candidate Sterling?
Thank you. And thanks to everybody that actually came here tonight and the people that will view this online. So I appreciate your dedication to our town. This is going to be an important election going forward. It's absolutely no surprise that everybody is not happy with the way things have been going. The policies that have worked for Campbell River when we were 15, 20,000 people are not going to work as we move forward to 40,000 people. I believe we do need a lot of new blood. We need new, fresh ideas. That's what I like to do. I like to give out ideas, work with people, and get things done. One of my biggest issues that I've had with a lot of the people in local council in the past has been those that are trying to appear to be effective versus being actually effective. And that's, to me, it's a very bad trait that a lot of government has. I'm not a big fan of gaslighting the public when it comes to important things. If you're looking for somebody that's a lifelong Campbell River resident, and you're looking for somebody that's strong and could be assertive, but is also a compassionate person, I would appreciate your support, and I love Campbell River. Let's put Campbell River first. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Candidate Chapman, your closing statement, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, I do want to thank everyone for coming out and those who are watching online and maybe those who are watching the recording. You know, it's important for us to get back to the basics. The last thing we want is another debacle that happened in south of the town in Willow Point, where people could not get their final occupancy permit because the city lacked sewage capacity. Now, you know, I have to ask, how does that happen? So we need to get back to the basics. We need to be looking after the things that we're supposed to be looking after. Water, sewer, roads, parks and recreation, arts and culture, garbage, planning and engineering. We need to make sure we can provide for ourselves and the basic needs that we have. Then we should look to the nice haves. I like to have nice haves too, but we are going to be faced with some very difficult decisions, and we hope we have a strong backbone and a base of strong leadership from which we can operate under. I'm also concerned about the lack of transparency. from council. I've only found a few times when council did a rise and report on decisions made in camera. It gives me the impression of backroom politics, and that needs to stop. Thank you for your support on October 15th. Make sure you vote.
Thank you. Candidate Donaldson.
So we're living through challenging times, and our communities are facing several complex social, political, and economic challenges. There are a lot of immediate concerns for our community: downtown safety and social supports, housing accessibility and affordability, asset management, inflation, and the human resource crisis. In society at large, there's also a big focus on partisanship, where people are labeled left or right. But that's not what municipal politics is about. Municipal politics is about our community and the people who make it whole. I believe in fact-based decision-making and good policy. I believe in following the evidence and doing what makes sense for our community, no matter who on council suggests it or what side they're from. Sometimes people want to put you on a side. Well, I'm on Campbell River's side. I want to see our community be the best it can be. I want to see it work for all of us, and I want to see it work for us better, together. As a city councillor, we need to be able to look at all the evidence, listen to the public, the staff, and relevant professionals, and make the best decision for our community, together. We need to compromise so that all of our interests are heard and our solutions are multidimensional. We need diversity and discourse to avoid groupthink and tunnel vision. We need to find solutions that are built to last and are based in reality. So I'm asking you to vote for a better Campbell River, one we build together, cooperatively, with differences at the table. And please vote for Gwen Donaldson on October 5th, 12th, or 15th. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, but not least, candidate Milligan.
The challenges our city is facing are the same challenges that cities all over our country are facing. To best address these challenges, we need a team that works well together, that can focus on a common vision, and collectively find the best actions to realize that vision. To best address the challenges, we need to use the best available information and respect our city staff's expertise. To best address the challenges, we need to have leadership that is first and foremost respectful of its residents, respectful of its city staff, and leadership that encourages the community to also be respectful to each other. I have a vision for our society and for Campbell River 100 years from now. In that vision, Campbell River is a destination where everyone wants to come to live, work, and play. We're a hotbed of innovative programs where our energy is generated locally. Our garbage generates energy. We use tidal energy. We produce much more of our food, much of it coming from the ocean. We have better social justice. Everyone is housed, and our life is full of community, whether that community be from within your own family, your work, your sports, your creative endeavors, or all of those. With that vision in mind, I can make an action plan along with the team for the next 4 years that will take us to that vision, action by action.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, and thank you to everyone who came out tonight. Thank you to everyone watching online and streaming it live. Thank you to the amazing team here at the Tidemark Theatre and the Campbell River Mirror. Please vote. The next debate is this coming Thursday, September 28th. It will be the final gathering of the remaining councillors running for the council seat in the city of Campbell River. Join us then. Thank you and good night.